Hello there. Welcome back to the booth here in London. I'm Marshall Cycliffe. That's, excuse me, Paul Cheon. Wow. Hello. You took my breath away, Paul. We've got round two lined up for you and ready to go in the feature match area. That is Shahar Shenhar on the left-hand side of your screen. He's facing off against Joe Soh. We're going to see just a little bit. We're going to see a little bit of Joe Soh there. In the last round, just on a quick live look, and it looked like he was playing kind of an Esper color deck, maybe a little bit of splashing. Shahar on the other side, though, he is running straight up blue-black, and boy, he has some powerful stuff in this deck.
Yeah. As you can take a look at Shahar's hand here, he's got Kaya, not just one, two copies of Kaya, which is generally considered to be one of the best uncommons in the set. You know, it's flexible, it's hybrid, so either you can be either white or black. But just the fact that, you know, if you can build up a board to protect Kaya, she will ultimately just remove two creatures off the battlefield.
In the meantime, there was a Dread Malkin on the battlefield for just a short second there because Shahar Shenhar used Sorin's Thirst to take it down. In the meantime, it's Toll of the Invasion, so that's going to get him what is right now at least going to be a 1/1 army token, and then he's going to get a chance to take a card, a non-land card from his opponent's hand. So he's going to get a lot of information here.
Yeah, and I've really liked Toll of the Invasion because, you know, oftentimes, you know, these 3-mana sorceries that take a card from your opponent's hand, it's not really the type of card you like playing in your main configuration. But because it has a mass, that completely changes the game, right? Because now you have that little extra, you have that creature on the battlefield. You know, there's several sacrifice themes in the format as well. So being able to just utilize that 1/1 token into additional resources goes a long way. On top of that, of course, you know, having that amass on the token on the battlefield means that any future cards that have amass means that you can continue growing that creature.
Looks like Shahar decided to take the removal spell away there from Joe, even though, at least at the moment, I don't see any white mana on the battlefield. But anyway, it was an Aven to follow things up. One of the more powerful blue commons, perhaps the best blue common. Wow, and he draws the other best blue common off the top of the library. That was Tamiyo's Epiphany. But on the other side, never mind it with this common nonsense. Let's get to the rares here. Soul Diviner.
Yes, Soul Diviner does so much work. Look at that thing. I mean, of course, just 2 mana, 2/3 is a very, very solid rate on a creature. But that effect, remove a counter from an artifact, creature, land, or planeswalker, draw a card, is extremely powerful in this format, especially because we have, of course, a mass. And, you know, if you do something like make a 3/3 amass token, you can use that to draw 3 cards over the course of the game. Of course, also on top of that, you just have planeswalkers, which naturally just have a lot of loyalty. So you can cash in loyalty for cards. And that's something that I'm happy doing pretty much always.
Yeah. So Joe's going to get aggressive here and send in with both of his creatures. Of course, this is a little bit suspect as it's just a 1/1 down on the ground, attacking into a 2/3, though does Shahar actually want to block here?
Yeah, there's a couple of cards that Shahar really needs to be scared of.
There's Unlikely Aid.
Unlikely Aid, which is a combat trick. And then, of course, Sorin's Thirst, which is in Shahar's graveyard. You know, I think Joe would be happy trading off in a mass token and a Sorin's Thirst to get that Soul Diviner off the battlefield.
And Shahar says, you know what, I'll just take the 1.
Yeah.
So a shrewd attack there from Joe. I like it. As I don't believe that he actually has any way to do this. Oh, maybe I lied. It was actually Kesmina's Transmutation, which would have finished off the Soul Diviner there.
But he still decides, Joe still uses the Transmutation because this does remove all abilities on the Soul Diviner. So this is an answer to the Diviner.
But as we can see in Shahar's hand here, he has Kaya, Bane of the Dead, excuse me, and as you mentioned, with just 1 more mana, that is an extremely powerful planeswalker that comes down, kills an opposing creature, and threatens to do that same thing again.
And, you know, looking at Shahar with Ashiok Dreamrender in hand, I mean, he must have drafted a full-on control deck and kind of is leaning on Ashiok to kind of end the game by kind of milling out your opponent.
And Ashiok might be a plan here if Shahar can fully leverage cards like Kaya. Like if you can go Kaya minus again, that's a way to do it. But this is a way that Joe can passively fight that back, right? He can cast cards like Tamiyo's Epiphany to just generate relevant card advantage. And that just makes it harder for Shahar.
Yeah, and Tamiyo's Epiphany just at its best in this specific matchup, where Shahar is just kind of playing a slower deck, and you can just happily just tap out and play this without facing a lot of pressure. That looks like it could be, that's a gold card. That looks like it could be an Enter the God Eternals for Joe Soh. We know he has one copy of that in his deck. Extremely powerful. Some of the other, he has one other gold card, which is Elite Guard Mage, that he's also splashing. But let's take a look. It was a little bit hard to see there. But Shahar was kind of really hoping for Joe to run out a large creature that turn because, of course, we know about the Kaya in his hand.
That is an Enter the God Eternals, though it looks like Joe is a blue mana short currently from being able to cast it. It does cost double blue. Maybe he has an island in his hand.
That is a Divine Arrow, which it looks like Joe, again, we talked about Joe splashing some white cards here, also playing a Blast Zone in his deck, but doesn't have white mana.
He's going to go for another copy of Tamiyo's Epiphany.
It's like a Rampant Growth.
Yeah, Joe, yeah, kind of. He has other 4-mana spells that he could cast, but he's decided against it. He just wants to get through his library. I'm sure he's prioritizing an island at this point, which is a little awkward at this late stage of the game, but still, the ability to cast Enter the God Eternals is going to be important down the stretch here. And this, of course, can dig him a lot of the way to an island.
Definitely. And playing Epiphany also makes a lot of sense here because he is facing up against a Kaya, which is threatening the ability to remove another large creature. So Joe's not really incentivized to play a big creature this turn, and he just wants to play out this Epiphany to just kind of future sculpt his draws.
So it looks like he's decided to keep one of the cards on top and 3 on the bottom. I think I saw that correctly. And he did find that island, by the way. So as early as next turn, we could see Enter the God Eternals, a super powerful sorcery in this blue-black color pair. And again, Joe is actually splashing white in this deck as well, though. We haven't seen that quite yet.
And a Vampire Opportunist from Joe.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's a 2-1. Doesn't look very good here with the pair of 1/1s on Shahar's side of the battlefield. But at the same time, neither of these creatures look like they're worthy of Kaya's -3 ability here. Oh, it's time.
There's Ashiok. Milia for 4.
Get the mill going here.
And it's a lot, right? Especially after your opponent has already played 2 copies of Tamiyo's Epiphany, drawing extra cards and more extra cards. And this is a legitimate win condition for Shenhar if he can keep the battlefield clear and keep any type of big bomb off the other side. And you know what? Kaya does a good job of that.
Yeah, if you could protect the Ashiok, I mean, by itself, Ashiok mills 20 cards off your opponent's deck. And Joe's already cast 2 Tamiyo's Epiphanies this game.
Exactly. So it gets kind of interesting because Joe very much has to respect Ashiok Dream Render at this point, as that will end the game. Super good in this matchup for Shenhar. Sometimes Ashiok doesn't have enough of a board effect to really warrant inclusion in the main deck. If you're getting beaten down by some red-white deck, that is not the card you want to see in your hand. But in a matchup like this, it really shines.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely the type of card, let's say you're playing against like an aggressive green-white proliferate deck. It doesn't, I mean, it's kind of a liability. You're kind of mulliganing. It's like not even a card, right?
Really bad.
But Shahar recognizing that this is kind of his primary win condition for his deck because he has multiple Kayas, lots of removal spells and card draw, he can afford to have something like an Ashiok to ultimately be the card that wins in the game.
And it doesn't hurt Soul Definer.
Yeah.
If you just, instead of using the minus ability, you just start cashing in
Loyalty for cards.
Yeah. Well, Joe says, you know what? It's time for the God Eternals to enter the fray here, and he's going to fire that off. Now, it's not on a particularly important creature. It's just the little amass army token there. But still, it's going to mill Shahar for 4. It's going to gain Joe life. It's going to get that thing off the battlefield, and it's going to mean amass 4. Since he already had a token, this is where things get interesting, right, Paul? Those 4 amass tokens have, I'm going to put it in air quotes, haste, right? They get to attack right now.
Yeah, that is the advantage, certainly, of amass. And Shahar actually choosing not to chump block there.
What happened there?
That looked like a 5/5. He just
was
let
Kaya
the
going to die either way, or at least become useless either way?
Right, exactly. That's exactly what was going to happen because, of course, Joe was attacking with a 2/1 and a 5/5.
Right.
So there's no point chump blocking because Kaya's going to go down to 2, and Kaya's effectively useless if you cannot use the -3 effect on the Kaya.
Yeah.
But then this also probably tells Joe that Shahar is unlikely to have any way to actually proliferate or put an additional counter on the Kaya.
Yeah, good point.
So something like a contentious plan,
Mm-hmm. Well, he's going to empty out his hand here. That's Herald and a Spark Reaper. So, sure, but not really the haymakers that Shahar was hoping for.
Yeah, Shahar, if Joe has any trick whatsoever to let that 5/5 go through, the 5/5 amass token, it's going to be rough. And looks like Shahar is just in chump block mode here.
Yeah, look, if he can hide behind Ashiok for long enough, he could get the win that way.
Right.
And look at this, a pair of Heralds of the Dreadhorde for Joe Soh. He says, I'll raise you. You got one, I got two. Sure. So there it is again, 1, 2, 3, 4. And how many are left? Looks like maybe 10.
Yeah, so 2 activations, 2 draw steps.
Probably
not a lot of time.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Wow, yeah. So this really has become a mini game revolving around Ashiok at this point.
Right. So Shahar just needs to string together maybe a couple of blockers, but he doesn't find it. He finds a land here.
But he's not in the worst spot here, right? Because he can block and sacrifice with his creatures to draw cards and kind of keep things rolling.
He can. However, Joe can attack with everything. If he attacks with everything, he will get that Ashiok off the battlefield because all 4 of his creatures have at least 2 power.
You're right. And then you got to feel that Joe would be in good shape to win this first game if he can take that. Really the only threat left, which is strangely Ashiok somehow. Now, if Joe attacks like this will not get Ashiok, and it will ensure that Shahar gets another activation. This is playing with fire here from Joe Soh.
Yeah, if Shahar just blocks everything, he can do that. Shahar can put the Spark Reaper on a 3/2, put his other 2 creatures in front of the other creatures that are attacking, then sack those creatures that are blocking to the Spark Reaper to try to string together some cards.
Yeah, and that could actually work. Oh, he's decided not to. So Shahar has decided to abandon this plan, and he's going to go a different route here. He figures he needs to get back ahead on board, maybe looking at his amass token there with 2 counters on it. If he was able to, say, find an amass 2 of any type, then it could hold back the Herald.
Yeah, but Joe just adding to the board here, one of his 4 Aven Eternals.
Erratic Visionary, a little slow here in this spot and not affecting the board in a great way. Joe Soh is just romping now in not quite a mirror match, but close.
And now Joe starting to chip in here. Keep in mind, though, Joe's been spending a lot of time maybe trying to attack Planeswalkers. Shahar's still at a fairly healthy 18 life. Wow, that is one of the biggest amass tokens that I've seen because it's an army token. It's a 6/6, and if this trade happens, it'll become an 8/8. With Herald of the Dreadhorde trading with the 2/2.
Can I call it an amass token? I know it's not technically.
Yeah, army to army.
You work at Watsu. Just give me the blessing. Just let me free.
Let me run it by Dave Humphries real quick.
Yeah, he's here.
He is.
And he was the lead designer for this set,
Absolutely.
Right? I guess he would be the one to ask. All right, can Shahar find his way out of this mess? He has fallen woefully behind. He finds an Aven Eternal that will at least threaten to get in the way of the opposing Aven Eternal.
Yeah, and this is kind of sometimes the downside of not being able to necessarily go wide and just going tall. Shahar has that Spark Reaper on the battlefield, which he has allowed to basically happily just chump block and draw a card, meaning that you're just not just falling behind here. And now Joe just has this gigantic token, but Shahar's still doing a good job keeping it at bay.
Yeah, he seems pretty content to just keep throwing the 1/1s in front and just sacking them for value. It does seem like a way that Shahar could actually fight his way back in. Now, he will at some point need to find an answer for the now 8/8 army token, but there are answers.
Yeah,
he could do that.
Yeah, Callous Dismissal, one of the
I
best
just got
ways.
a shiver when you said that.
With army tokens, get that 8/8 off the battlefield, make another 1/1 to sack 2 Spark Reaper. think Shahar likely will take the 3 damage here. But keep in mind, there is that Vampire Opportunist on the battlefield, and Joe does have a bunch of mana,
yes,
so
he
that could be his finisher.
Total. Yeah. Shahar Shenhar also has a Tyrant's Scorn in his deck, which either mode actually kills an amass token.
Right.
So Shahar decides not to sacrifice the Aven. He does want that trade to happen to get that flyer out of the air. And look at this, another one. You mentioned earlier, Paul, how many of these he has. Oh, he's going to get countered, though.
Yep.
No escape for that one. And that also gives him a scry one. This is a big scry here for Shahar. And he's going to put that on the bottom.
Look at this. Now we're looking at a 9/9 token. And Shahar has an erratic visionary, however, and does need to find an answer to that token. The question is, does he want to activate the visionary on his turn and find a removal spell, or does he want to just block with the visionary, then sacrifice it to the Spark Reaper, and then get the loot effect in from the visionary?
Right. Because with 2 lands in hand for Shahar, the pressure is very much on him, and he's just going to pass it back. The Lazotep Reaver there from Joe Soh, you know, this is where having extra counters on your army tokens actually kind of worse, right? Like, it's like you'd much rather have a wider board here if possible, or start to build a new army.
Right. You're just kind of all in on this token, right? You can't just make like a 7/7 and a 2/2.
That's right. What did Shahar find? Well, nothing yet.
So
he
certainly
got rid
not
of one of those lands.
certainly not a Tyrant Scorn.
Akira's Dambreaker is what he's got in his hand. Well, that is not even close to big enough to being able to tussle.
With a 9/9.
Yeah, with the 9. Wow, another land. Shahar really finding a ton of lands late in the game. He has been digging, but flooding out here, and especially at a time when he really, really needs some action. He's been able to use that Spark Reaver to tread water, but not to get ahead. It has not bought him back into this game.
Oh, but this was not a bad draw, though. Bleeding Edge from Shahar.
Okay, okay.
Means that the inevitability is now gone
The
from Joe's
opportunist
side.
gone.
Right.
Okay.
So now he gets the 2/2 token, which he will likely use to block sack again.
He can do it again. Right? Hey, he's hanging right in there. And let's not forget that Joe, maybe 4 turns ago, was down to 9 cards in his library. He's probably still on a little bit of a clock there from those Ashiok activations plus the Tamiyo's Epiphanies we saw earlier from Joe.
Oh, and now Shahar deciding whether or not he wants to just run out the Dambreaker, because of course it is a 6-mana 5/6 ETB, enters the battlefield, proliferate, which will give him an extra counter on the army token.
Yes.
However, that'll only be 8 power. But he does, of course, have the Spark Reaper, so he can choose to triple block.
Just go all in.
Right. And, I mean, that's what it looks like he's at least representing here. But I think Joe's like happy if you can get 2 of these creatures off the battlefield. But, I mean, at this point, you're kind of committing yourself to the triple block. I mean, because now you're either chump blocking and not drawing a card, or you're triple blocking and losing 2 cards. Joe doesn't have a lot of cards left in his library.
No, this really is a time game here for Shahar, just needing to find as much as possible, and he's going to make the less intuitive play of just chump blocking here. Now, he doesn't get the card out of it, but he did get it, and here we go. Spellkeeper Weird now for Shahar. What was the best thing he had in his graveyard to buy back?
Well, it doesn't get back the Kaya. It only gets back instants and sorceries.
Okay, okay.
So he could get a Tamiyo's Epiphany.
Yeah,
Bleeding
Edge.
That's pretty strong.
Bleeding
Edge.
That's a thing.
Whoa!
Did he win? I can't see how many cards were left for Joe. I think it was only 3, but did he decide to just give up there?
That he just didn't have any other way to win? Wow.
I'm going to assume that Shahar won that first game, but I honestly don't know. We'll tell you right after these messages. We'll be back, and I'll give you an update on that and much more from our other table. See you in a minute.
I'm here with Ben Weitz, and we're going to crack this pack of War of the Spark, and I want to know what your first pick is going to be here if we were drafting this on the first day of the Mythic Championship.
Yeah, so we've got a nice rare. We'll get to that in a little bit. I see a Chandra's Pyrohelix, which is a removal spell I really like. There's a Firemind Vessel, which is really sweet for the 5-color decks, but it's not really something that I like first picking. I sort of like moving in when I have really powerful rares. But our mythic rare that we opened in this pack is actually Gideon Blackblade.
Nice.
Rest in peace. But hopefully he'll be able to slay our opponent before he ultimately bites the dust himself.
So is this card just slam dunk, windmill slam, Gideon Blackblade in the deck?
Oh yeah, I will take this card and then I will try really hard to be white because it's really powerful. I mean, it's just a 3-mana 4/4 with upside. So yeah, it's just a really, really good card.
You mentioned the 5-color deck. We're really new into this format, so I've got to ask you, is that a thing, and is it a real thing?
I mean, 5 is maybe more than the actual number, but like somewhere between 3 and 4, it's definitely a real thing. There's a lot of mana fixing in green specifically, and there's just the power level of this set is really high. There's a bunch of planeswalkers that you can splash and put in your deck, and so yeah, I think that deck's a real thing.
All right, so there you have it. We're going to take Gideon Blackblade, rest in peace, but he's going to be pretty good in our deck here in our hypothetical draft of War of the Spark. Ben Weitz, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And welcome back to the booth here at Mythic Championship 2 from London. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe. That's Paul Cheon. I've got updates for you. First update from the main game, which is it was Shahar who won. We were like, it looks like Shahar won, but you realized. So first, we saw a line of play that made sense, which was Spellkeeper Weird, and then if Shahar could just chump block the next turn, he could chump block with that, use it to get a card back from his graveyard, then make another creature off of that, like with Bleeding Edge or something along those lines. So those next 2 turns had a lot of blockers, but there was something that you remembered late on why Joe can concede there.
Yeah, so if you saw, Joe had 3 cards left in his library, so you would ask, why would he concede? You still have cards left. But keep in mind that Joe Soh actually had cast 2 copies of Tamiyo's Epiphany, so we actually knew the what was left in his deck and realized that if Shahar just chump blocks my army token for 3 straight turns, I can't possibly win, which is why he conceded, because that game was pretty long. If you do want to win the match, you need to concede if there is no hope of actually winning.
That's right. Now, down on our other tables, by the way, I have some updates for you because one of our matches is finished, and that was Paulo Vitor Damarosa playing against Riku Kumagai. That was 2-0 for Paulo. So he's just cruising right through to the 2-0. So looking really good for our future drafter there. And then we've also had Elias Watsfeld, who was a former draft champion, right?
Right.
And he played against the GOAT, John Finkel. They're headed into game number 3. They're tied at a game apiece. We also, of course, have Luis Scott Vargas in the feature match area for our Time Walk match, which we'll hope to get to. He's playing against Haruya Kakamai, but I'm not going to tell you what that happened because
we got to watch it.
Because we got to watch it as it comes out as well. So those are your updates. Right now, the players are just getting ready and shuffled up. But really sweet plays there from Shahar to find a win. He had a couple of really critical moments during the course of that game to figure it out, including when he decided to let the Ashiok plan go, but he really didn't because that did end up being the way that he won the game.
It still worked. And Spark Reaper, I want to say, was kind of the MVP
it was great.
in that game because that allowed Shahar to just continuously chump block the giant army token that was on the battlefield, but not fall behind because he was able to kind of replace the creature that he was blocking with an additional card and also a little bit of life gain on top of that. You know, one of my favorite things actually in kind of this slower control matchup is like how deep the players go after sideboarding, right? Because there's all these cards that you would never even think about playing in your main configuration because it's too slow or it's a little too clunky. But in this matchup where both players aren't really doing anything, you're like, okay, how many 6-drops can I put into my deck to really try to go over the top of my opponent's deck? You know, cards like Tidebearer Giants. How many of those do I have in my sideboard? I'll bring those in.
In the meantime, let's take a look at John Finkel versus Elias Watsfeld here in their third game. And what is that? Tybalt on the side of John Finkel?
Yeah, Tybalt, Rakish Instigator.
That's right.
Some Devils on the battlefield, and Elias just on white mana.
Yeah, kind of mission accomplished there for Finkel already. He's gotten the 2 activations of Tybalt, and that's kind of what you're going for there. And now Tybalt just sits there and is annoying.
Yeah. I mean, the life gain clause is relevant. There are many incidental ways to gain life in this format. So
in white specifically.
Right. And so that static of players can't gain life will come up a lot.
It's Teo's Light Shield there. Yep. And it's actually doing a pretty decent job here. Well, let's let this one play itself out. But you know what? We've got Shahar Shenhar and Joe Soh up in the main match. Why don't we head up there as they are ready to go for their next game? And also, things looking horrendous here for Elias Watsfeld. This one could be over quickly anyway.
Yeah, Angrass Rampage using the sacrifice a creature mode there to get the 1/4 off the battlefield, and then allowing John Finkel to get. Oh,
by the way,
wow, that was it.
We decided to just catch the handshake there instead, and that was John Finkel improving to 2-0 in his booster draft, something that he does on the regular. He's known as the best Magic player ever in many people's minds, but he is certainly the best limited Magic player ever, and that is not even close. He is an absolute draft machine, and we are into game number 2 here. Shahar Shenhar versus Joe Soh. Shahar in the MPL, as you can see by his that logo there as well. Has really embraced the streaming that some of the MPL players do as well. And you can watch Shahar on his stream. And it's pretty cool because, you know, you get this different perspective, right? When we see them here, the players are silent, right? They're really trying to actually not say that much if possible.
Right.
But when you watch their streams, they'll actually talk you through what they're doing. By the way, this is desperation time already for Shahar. Now, he's not under a huge amount of pressure, but not finding lands here is really bad.
Absolutely. Whenever your opponent goes main phase, activate Erratic Visioner, you're like, okay, they're looking for lands.
Exactly.
They want to hit their land drops. And especially with Shahar, with the Hand of All Islands, really wants to put together some swamps because he has that Kaya in hand along with Bleeding Edge.
Yeah, Kaya, not easy to cast. 6 mana, and in this case, triple black is not easy.
Right.
And boy, Shahar's going to have to do this again. And the pressure has well and truly mounted now. 3-drop into 4-drop from Joe Soh has put out 3, 4, 5, 6 power right now, and there could even be more on the way.
So Joe with 2 profitable attacks here with the Haven Eternal and Herald of the Dreadhorde.
Was there a comma in there? There's a lot of Planeswalkers in this set, man.
Right.
This is interesting because while Tamiyo's Epiphany is one of the stronger commons in blue, I think if you're Shahar, you're a little relieved, right? Because this could have been, you know, land 5-drop creature, and this game may have been just over.
Yeah, but actually, I think Shahar's a little bit sad because does he
have no escape?
He has a no escape in his hand. So you really wanted Joe to just play out a creature so we can actually interact in some way.
Yeah.
But this kind of messes everything up. He can still loot, but you know now Joe gets to really like sculpt his hand and kind of get the perfect sequence of draws over to turns 5 and 6 of this game.
Joe Soh just cleanly playing around, no escape here. But Shahar does get to dig deeper either way. It was either going to be scry 1 or a loot for 1.
I think Joe bottoming 1.
And he found he dug up another one, by the way. So here we go. This is huge. Is this a swamp? No, it is a land, so he probably can't afford to get rid of it. He's just going to have to get rid of one of his black cards here. But still, Shahar desperately needed a swamp. He already had to discard Davriel there on the bottom part of your screen into the graveyard, which would have been way too slow this game anyway. And look at that. He's already off it. He just says, all right, Kaya, I'm sorry, but it's not going to happen this time.
Oh.
He's going to ghost Kaya.
And no black source still for Shahar. Drawing an island, kind of taunting him with a handful of black spells.
Now, he does have Haven Eternal in hand, and he probably is priced into casting it here, but he has just fallen so far behind that the best he can do is cast it and start to try to trade off.
Yeah.
Now, the good news for him is that with the 1/1 on the ground plus the 1/3, he actually does have a block on Herald that makes some sense. And then he can trade off the Avens in the air. So not the worst.
Yeah,
it's
but
just so precarious.
But you just know Joe's going to have a really nice turn this turn.
Yeah.
Your opponent just cast Tamiyo's Epiphany and kept 3 cards on top.
Yeah.
So this is,
which are all now in his hand.
Right.
Yeah.
And Shahar's now in the situation of like, cross my fingers, hope you don't have anything, but I know you have something. Yeah, you see that callous dismissal in Joe's hand.
And now in his graveyard, because he just cast it. So Callous Dismissal is going to send the Erratic Visionary packing. And look at this tempo hit
Big
here
attack
from Joe as well. He grew that army token twice this turn. So now it's a 3/3 attacking on the ground. And all of a sudden, things look awful here for Shahar.
So Shahar has an Ob Nixilis' Cruelty in hand. I think his best bet might be to just block Herald.
Yeah.
Right, block the Herald and just hope to draw a black source to get that that token off the battlefield because it will grow to a 5/5 this turn.
And then he can kill it and have him down to just the 2/2 flyer.
Right, but he still has to deal with a pair of 2/2 flyers. So just really in rough shape here.
I think that Shahar sees the same line that you did, though, Paul. He recognizes that this is not going to get any easier, and the window will actually close fairly quickly on getting rid of that token with the Ob Nixilis' Cruelty. If it picks up one more counter, then it's out of range, and and then he has to orchestrate some block with it, and it just gets really awkward. So this needs to be a swamp. I mean, if this game is going to continue, it needs to be a swamp, and it is. Shahar Shenhar finds the swamp at perhaps the last possible moment. Good chance that it's too late anyway, but this gives him at least a tiny chance to get back in this game.
Right. He can fire off the Ob Nixilis' Cruelty here.
And he should just do so, right?
Yeah.
Like, this will not change Joe's attacks either way. He's just sending in the squad.
Yeah, but Shahar is still on a 2-turn clock just from the flyers alone.
That's
so
right.
Still not out yet.
He decided not to fire it off right away, so he's passed the turn back to Joe. And this could open the door for an instant speedway for that army token to grow. Though, to be fair, there's very few of those in the set. So Joe says, I like to go to combat, and this is an easy one for me. I'm going to send everything into the red zone. So Shahar can go to blocks if you'd like.
And Shahar now thinking...
Oh, so Shahar also has a copy of Soren's Thirst that he's trying to line up for a little bit later. That could be really key, but again, it would require another swamp. So he takes down the token. It gets double exiled. It's just straight up out of here. But he takes 4 and he's down to 3. So he really, again, needs to find a swamp or a flyer or this one's going to be done.
Yeah, but now Joe can just litter the board here. He's got a Lazotep Reaver and a Vampire Opportunist, which you can just play out this turn to just flood the board. Alternatively, he can play out a Tamiyo's Epiphany and one of the creatures. And it's actually very, very close because Shahar's sitting at 3 life right now.
It is interesting. If he had played the Lazotep Reaver pre-combat, it would have actually forced the issue on Shahar in kind of an interesting way.
Right.
I don't think that there was anything that Joe was particularly worried about, so he didn't feel the need to do so. But it is, these are the little things that you pick up early in a format, and we are very early in the format as the set pre-release actually is, well, effectively tomorrow. Here.
Right. But Joe very firmly in the lead here. Shahar sitting at 3 life, facing 2 flyers. That is a lethal attack. Now Shahar has multiple ways to deal with these flyers, but he still needs to draw a swamp. Both of the ways that he has in hand, the Bleeding Edge and the Soren's Thirst, require 2 black mana.
So instead of the Reaver, he's going to play the Vampire Opportunist and pass. Is this a swamp? It is.
Ooh. Okay.
Okay, it's getting interesting, but although the Opportunist could just be the way this game ends now as well, if you're sitting in Shahar's seat, the pressure has mounted well and truly.
Yeah, and so Shahar this turn has to run out Soren's Thirst because even if he uses Bleeding Edge this turn, sure, he can deal with one of the flyers, but then Shahar's going to go down to 1 from the flyer, and then if Joe has land number 7, can use the Vampire Opportunist to finish off the game. So yes, Shahar does use Soren's Thirst to deal with one of those flyers, and then next turn, we'll try to use a Bleeding Edge to get rid of either the flyer or the Opportunist.
Yeah, I assume that the Opportunist is more important just because with 1 land, it just sits there and kills you without ever even entering combat, not even giving you a chance to possibly interact with it.
Yeah, so now Shahar's sitting at 3 life. Joe has the ability to activate the Vampire Opportunist, so he might just not play any other spells, because if you just activate the Opportunist, Shahar's now going to sit at 1 and is going to need 2 removal spells to deal with both a Lethal Eternal and the activation from the Opportunist.
That's right. Now, as it stands, Soren's Thirst does throw that off by a turn, but
Shahar has already cast the Soren's Thirst, so he needs maybe another Soren's Thirst.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the problem is that even a premium removal spell like Bleeding Edge just doesn't seem like it's quite enough here. What does he have in his hand? Let's look. Yeah, no, there's no more Soren's Thirst there.
So
Spark
he has
Reaper.
That could gain you some life.
It's not enough though for that either, because he'd need to activate it twice, and he doesn't have enough mana for that.
So yeah, Shahar can draw a flyer as well. He can draw, for example, his own. He can draw like an Aven Eternal or something to block the Aven Eternal and then use Bleeding Edge on the Opportunist.
He did not, though.
Right.
Toll of the Invasion hit the graveyard there for Shahar off of that loot.
Yeah, Shahar needed to be at... If Shahar was at 4, he would have been able to survive an additional turn.
Yeah, and maybe put something together, though. We have to remember that Joe also has a grip full of cards still waiting for Shahar beyond what's on board. Well, let's see Bleeding Edge here now from Shenhar.
Oh, no, he wouldn't have had mana to sacrifice creatures to the Spark Reaper, right? Because,
no.
Yeah. So
no, that's what I was saying. He'd need to do it twice. That's the problem.
Right.
Also cast a Spark Reaper that turn, so a little much. In the meantime, as you mentioned, Joe, just with no real reason to do anything other than just activate the Vampire Opportunist, says, okay, you can target it, but I'm going to activate it in response. You're down to 1, and I have a lethal flying threat here. And this is desperation time now.
2-mana removal spell? Nothing?
Nope, he doesn't find it, so Shahar Shenhar is going to have to pack it in. And that is going to be a game number 3 between our players here. So game number 1 played out much differently, but it was really a story of mana issues for Shahar Shenhar here in this one. All right, we're going to take a short commercial break. When we come back, though, we'll have more live Magic here from London. Don't go anywhere.
Doesn't even matter. I had to fall to lose it all. But in the end, it doesn't even matter. Doesn't even matter. I had to fall to lose it all. But in the end, it doesn't even matter.
Back to coverage here of Mythic Championship 2 from London, England. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe. That's Paul Cheon. Thanks so much for coming along, spending a little time with us here on a nice Friday afternoon, at least here in London. We are watching War of the Spark Limited, and we've got, well, all the rounds lined up for you. We've only got one done behind us. We're in the middle of round number 2. We've got a whole nother round of that before we transition. I know you're ready. You're excited. We'll be seeing Modern as well. We've got Shahar Shenhar and Joe Soh down in the feature match area, and they are ready for game number 3. Game number 1 and 2 played out very differently from each other. Game number 1 going the full distance. Joe conceding a couple of turns before he was inevitably going to have no cards left in his library and get decked, as we call it. Game number 2, though, he was able to have a quick start and capitalize on the mana issues from Shahar and finish him off pretty easily there.
Yeah, and it looks like Shahar is kind of the more controlling of the two blue-black decks. So Joe definitely wants to be more aggressive. He does have the quad Aven Eternals in his deck, and just kind of get the ball rolling there. But oh, look at this start.
There's Davriel now for Shahar Shenhar, and in these control-type matchups, this is the type of card that can put a very big dent in the proceedings. Joe effectively never going to be below at 1 or 0 cards in hand. I just don't think that's going to happen. Whoa.
What just happened?
Maybe he has Vraska's finisher.
Yeah.
Kaboom. So what that does is effectively facilitate a trade.
Right.
He attacks his 2-1 and it dies, and you're thinking, well, what the? And then it's, okay, well, finisher just means, all right, I'll just trade these off.
Definitely.
But again, Davriel here can just put a big dent in the proceedings by just simply saying, okay, well, you thought you had 3 extra cards that you now don't.
Right. Being able to, yeah, it just gets you so far ahead on cards, right? Especially on the play where you have that blocker. If you just, 3 activations of Davriel is just so hard to come back from.
Yeah. Aven Eternal, one of the cards that really stood out when you just sort of browse the set, you know, the first time you take a look and you're like, well, what does this card do? It's like, holy smokes. And you know what? It lives up to its reputation. It's been excellent here in the feature match area.
Absolutely.
Now it's going to trade off for this Vraska's finisher and keep Davriel Rogue Shadow Mage alive for another turn and basically ensure that that 3rd activation happens. That's 3 cards out of hand for Joe Soh. While he gets to choose them, it's still just a lot. It's just a big number.
Yeah, and that will definitely help because I believe Shahar mulliganed this game. So this kind of unmulligans him, right? Because now Joe's also down 3 cards off of this Davriel.
And this is an interesting decision point for Shahar. He's just going to go ahead and take the last counter off of Davriel. But he does have Soul Diviner in his hand and could consider trying to keep Davriel alive. The downside here, of course, is that there is an Aven now, and he just knew he wasn't going to be able to do that.
Right. So now Shahar has his card advantage engine in play with Soul Diviner, but Joe's got Herald of the Dreadhorde.
No comma. Come on, it's a Planeswalker set, and you put out Herald of the Dreadhorde, Paul? I want to see some loyalty on that thing, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
In the meantime, Shahar, it looks like he went for the block and then used Soul Diviner. That actually kills the token because it just had the 1 counter on it, but he does get that card. And this is going to be a very, very important turn next turn.
I'm sure Shahar keeps going, stop. Joe's going, stop using this block sack trick on me.
It is getting annoying.
Yeah.
There's Sorin's Thirst to kill one of the Aven Eternals, though, so that's really important there for Shahar.
Shahar needs a spell here, though.
He really does.
He's kind of run out of gas. Despite the fact that he's gotten those 3 cards, Joe's just been able to continue to string together threats here. And Joe with two good attacks here. Happy to trade Herald of the Dreadhorde here with Soul Diviner. Build that MS. Build that zombie token. And now Tamio's Epiphany. Oh, and look at this. Chaining into another Tamio's Epiphany. Exactly the type of thing that you want to be doing in this slower control matchup. Or heck, any matchup, to be honest.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah. I'll take a card plus Tamio's Epiphany every time.
Looks like Liliana's Triumph is the last card in hand for Shahar, though I'd say I'm a little surprised he didn't just fire it off.
Yeah.
Like, what is he?
I believe he's just concerned about dealing with a 4/4 zombie token. So he just, if he did,
he'll sacrifice Herald.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, if that's the case, then he can fire it off this turn. Ooh. Hello. The 3rd Aven Eternal of the game here for Joe Soh, and that is going to make that army token into a 3/3.
Yeah, and this is really rough for Shahar because now Joe has a favorable attack with all 3 creatures that don't have summoning sickness this turn.
And Shahar says, yeah, you got it. You got another Aven Eternal. It is an obscene amount of those that Joe Soh has, and extremely difficult to beat. And now Shahar's in desperation mode. He's going to try to trade off Soul Diviner for Herald, and that is not where you want to be if you're Shahar Shenhar.
So now Shahar's going to go down to 8. He's going to use a Liliana's Triumph to get one of those Aven Eternals off the battlefield. But still facing 7 damage. You got a 5/5 and a 2/2 flyer that Shahar needs to deal with. And, you know, he's He's only drawn lands for the last 4 or 5 turns, so really needs an impactful, high-impact spell here.
Wow, it is one. It is Tamiyo's Epiphany. This could find him what he needs, but he's going to have to hit. He could see up to 6 cards to get there, and he's got 4 mana left over, Paul.
So that might be it. That looks like it could be a Spark Harvest. And if that is a Spark Harvest, he doesn't have a creature to sacrifice, so he needs both land and Spark Harvest to deal with the 5/5, but that would buy him some more time. And
that would.
The No Escapes, however, you know, he's going to be tapped out next turn, so if Joe follows us up with another creature, No Escape's not really the type of card that you want to be holding in your hand.
Interestingly, it's not just a land that he could find. It's also a 1, 2, or 3 mana creature that he could pair with his Spark Harvest in a desperation situation. So he's actually fairly live to get rid of the token if he keeps Spark Harvest and nothing.
Well,
he certainly doesn't want the No Escapes.
Yeah, I think you want to just bottom the No Escapes and just keep land, Spark Harvest, play
just
land.
Guarantee it.
Right. Take care of the 5/5 and then just hope to draw some spells here.
Hey, this is not the worst case scenario for Shahar. He was facing near lethal threat, and now he's got this board stabilized. Now he is down to 6, and it's going to take some work off the top of the library, but he's given himself a chance.
If Joe plays a creature this turn, it's going to be very tough for Shahar, but doesn't have one.
This, even though this isn't a creature, which would have been the worst case, this is pretty bad.
Absolutely.
For Shahar Shenhar.
That's 4 spells? No, it looks like there's an island there too.
Man, Joe has just been doing really good work here with this deck. Super impressed by Joe's play as well.
No, his deck is...
You can tell he's been practicing. A lot of the players have not had much chance to get practice in. It's just so difficult given that the set hasn't been released. It's a lot of what we generously call theory crafting floating around. But and I feel it too. It's interesting just, you know, normally by the time you and I get in the booth, Paul, I will have done numerous drafts, you know, upwards of 20 drafts to try to prepare. And here it's just not available thus far. And, you know, we're kind of learning along with them.
Right, sure.
You haven't played this format in quite a while.
Yeah, it's been a long time. People ask me like, "Hey, so you know, what are your thoughts about this?" I'm like many sets removed from working on this one.
Which one is this again?
Oh yeah, this is the Planeswalker one.
Right. Ooh, Eternal Skylord now for Joe Soh, and that has to be the game, and it is. Shahar Shenhar extends the hand, and Joe Soh 2-1 over Shahar. A great victory for him. Joe, one of the better players in his pod, but I have to say his pod is nasty. That's why they were the featured pod. Paulo Vitor Rosa is in there as well as Shahar Shenhar and a few other big-name players. But Joe Soh is going to find himself in the finals of that pod.
Yeah, and you just saw the power level of these blue commons, right? Oftentimes you ask, you know, what's better, Aven Eternal or Tamiyo's Epiphany? Why don't you just have 6 copies of those 2 cards combined? Because they both just do so much work.
That's right. Now, we've got Time Walk for you. That's right. We are at the Mythic Championship, but we've got Time Walk right now. Let's head down. We picked Luis Scott Vargas to follow him. He had a bumpy start, a quick loss in his first game where his opponent kind of did the game plan that he wanted better. And look at this. Charm Stray from Luis.
Don't you tell people not to play this card?
We did tell people not to. But look, he's got the combo. The funny part is the combo's not actually working for him here thanks to First Strike.
Grim Initiate preventing...
Even a sacrificial attack from the Stray. That does not stop Ajani's Pridemate proper, though, from attacking if Luis would like to do so. He's playing against Ruya Kakamai here.
What just... Okay. So a Band Together from Luis. And look at this.
Wow.
The Band Together actually makes the creatures deal the damage. So he got a trigger from the Charm Stray, which is a 1 point of lifelink damage, which then put a counter on the Ajani's Pridemate.
This is game number 2, by the way, and as you can see, we've got it in kind of speed mode here because we are near the end of the round, but we wanted to get you an update on what Luis was up to with his green-white Proliferate deck that he had going on. And here we go, another counter. And by the way, this is really important, Paul, because now the Charm Stray can attack, and it has lifelink, so things can get out of hand.
Right. And Kakamai just looks like he has mostly a handful of lands. Oh, I see a Heartfire here, so he can block, sacrifice the Grim Initiate to get one of the big creatures off the battlefield here. He can go First Strike, damage on the stack, and then use it to finish off the Troll, but it looks like he goes for the Ajani's Pridemate instead.
Taruya, by the way, plays for Team Musashi. one of the best teams out in the team series. So here's Ob Nixilis, and that is going to be used to take down a key creature on the other side of the battlefield, but at a very major cost to Taruya. You get to draw 2 cards. That is almost never where you want to be.
And Luis with one of his 3 Ajani's Pride Mates.
Yep.
Playing another one here. And this is the downside of a Nixilis. When you're kind of behind and you have to use it to kill creatures, you're not actually ahead. You're just down cards.
This isn't working at all.
Yeah.
Luis is just going to have this board built out again in half a heartbeat. And look at that. It's even the third Pride Mate here on the battlefield. And then the Charmed Stray, Luis's now signature card. I'm never going to let him forget this, by the way. Attacks in and gets that Pride Mate trigger going. And it looks like Luis is pretty much able to just run away with this thing from this point. Yeah, especially with getting a key blocker out of the way there.
Yeah, now he can safely attack with the 3 creatures in power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Taruya is in an untenable position from this point, able to amount no offense and really no defense, and he's just drawn a bunch of lands. Luis Scott Vargas capitalizing and really showing Ob Nixilis to be not the answer you want if what you really want are removal spells.
Yeah, Ob Nixilis, its static ability is pretty strong. It does deal damage over time. But the thing is, I think it's at its best if you're an aggressive deck, right?
Yeah.
If you're putting a lot of pressure on your opponent, and then you can actually just use Ob Nixilis as a way to kind of clear the way, get in for damage, and also keep in mind, anytime your opponent draws a card, they take damage. So it's kill a creature, they draw 2 cards, but they still take 2.
And then the next turn they draw their card for the turn, and they're like, yeah. The best way to think about it is if you're killing a blocker with it, you're probably in the right space. If you're killing a creature with it, it might not end up working well.
Right, exactly.
All right, we're going to take a short break, but after that, we'll be back at the news desk with Rich and Maria. We'll see you in just a little bit.